All right, we are live, and I'm going to go ahead and get this started. So welcome to Food Fight. This is episode 110 of the Food Fight Show. It is fantastic to be back here recording this podcast where we discuss Chef, its various projects, operations, and everything in between. So as always, I'm Nell Shamrell-Harrington, co-host of this podcast, and joining me today are Adam Leff and Tom McLaughlin. It's fantastic to have you both here. And Adam, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Adam Leff. I am a technical community advocate at Chef. My main responsibility is acting as a community manager for Inspec, which is our compliance automation software. I've been with Chef for about 2 years now. Prior to Chef, I did a lot of different operations and engineering stuff at WebMD for about 8.5 years.
Awesome. And Tom, tell us who you are.
So I'm Tom McLaughlin. I am, let's go with where I am going. I'm going to be the community engineer for a very small early stage startup called Cloud Zero, which is doing, cloud visibility and predictability. So that's where I'm heading. I was up until just very recently, I was the engineering advocate for ThreatStack, which is a cloud security monitoring SaaS platform. I like the DevRel space. I really love the fact that I can take my engineering know-how and apply it and, and teach other folks. So happy to be here.
Awesome. It's good to have you. Well, now that we've done our intros, let's go into a few announcements. And the biggest ones are the ones that came out of ChefConf. ChefConf was held in the beautiful city of Austin, Texas, just a few weeks ago. I had a great time, lots of connections with the community, both through and not through code, accompanied with, of course, fantastic barbecue. How was ChefConf for you two?
I ate my weight in brisket, so that's awesome. I think I might still be digesting it, and I'm totally okay with that. But, it still feels like a family reunion every time. Great, diverse crowd. The keynotes were great. The breakouts were great. Met a whole bunch of new people. The hack day was awesome. Met a whole bunch of people that have been contributing to Inspec who I've never met in person before. So all in all, I think it was a great show, as it is every year.
Awesome. Tom, how was it for you?
I had a total blast. This was my first Chef event. This is my second time in Austin ever, and a second time also in just a few weeks. The city is wonderful. The food is great. The beer was great too. But yeah, no, ChefConf was amazing. Just like the amount of energy that was going on, during the entire event. If you were at ChefConf, I was the guy walking around with the 6-foot cutout of his coworker and offering people donuts so that you would talk to me. So
it was kind of creepy.
It was cool. No.
Yeah. It felt like that cutout was staring at me whenever I was in the
I know.
room.
A lot of people just kept turning around, just being this. Actually, one night I took Pete Flatlock. That was, if you look up hashtag Pete Flatlock on Twitter, you'll see a lot of what happened. But I actually took it out to the bar one night, and somebody said goodbye to him, and then realized it wasn't a real person.
I wonder how many beers in that was. But that is funny. Awesome. Well, we had quite a few announcements come out of ChefConf. I'm just going to cover them briefly. The one that is nearest and dearest to my heart, because I worked on it, is the Habitat Builder service. It was such an immense amount of work and quite a bit of crunch to get it there toward the end, but it was such a glorious feeling to see it work live on the main stage. Incidentally, for anyone who works at Chef or anyone who might work at Chef in the future, the words, "This is for the main stage at ChefConf," will get you just about anything within reason, which I did not know beforehand. So what the Builder service does is it's a major step forward for managing and updating dependencies. So if you have a Habitat package that depends on the SSL package, and the SSL package is updated, then that package that's dependent on it will automatically be updated to use that updated package, and then it will be deployed to an acceptance environment for you to look at it. So it takes a lot of that manual work of managing dependencies out. The other major Habitat announcement was scaffolding. So we now have built-in scaffolding for Node.js applications, Rails applications, I think Go applications, and more. And what this allows you to do is, for frameworks that have a strong opinion or strong conventions, they're usually deployed the same way, at least very similar. So what we're doing is we're building in that scaffolding, which you can use if you want to, you don't have to, and that will automatically set up your Habitat package to be deployed the way most Rails apps are, most Node apps are, most Go apps are. So it gives you, it gets you to that packaged application so much faster. Third, the other one was the beta release of Chef compliance integration with Automate. So this is going to allow someone to run compliance scans of their infrastructure directly from Automate, better integrating all of their configuration management tooling. This is in beta release right now, but I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves as we move to the general release in the future. And then finally, my favorite part of ChefConf personally were the Awesome Chef Awards, or Awesome Community Chef Awards. And this year we had 4 recipients. There was Annie Hedgepath, who was recognized in particular with her role around Inspec. I know you know her and have worked with her, Adam. She's written a lot of fantastic tutorials on how to use it. Additionally, she's a fantastic role model thanks to her honesty, humility, and infectious enthusiasm for learning. We are so thrilled she is part of our community. Now, the second was Ben Deng, who is recognized in particular for his work with Habitat. So Ben has been an absolutely incredible representative for the Habitat community, his care and feeding of new community members, the level of effort he has put toward making people feel welcome and heard, and his overall willingness to jump in and help at the drop of a hat, or a habit-hats, as we like to say. And those are all reasons we're ecstatic to have him as part of our community. Third one was Sean O'Mara, who before this I heard someone refer to him as the Susan Lucci of the Awesome Chef Awards. Susan Lucci is a soap opera actress who was nominated for an Emmy, I don't even know how many years, and never won it until one year that finally changed. So this is the year it changed for Sean. He is a prolific community cookbook maintainer and has introduced tools like Kitchen Dockin to improve the testing process. He's one of the most insightful and passionate members of our community, and his talks have led many of us into the light. And the last one was actually a major surprise to me, and to avoid seeming self-serving, Adam, do you mind taking the announcement of that one?
Yeah, let me find my notes. Where is, oh, it was Nell, right. Nell was the 4th Awesome Community Chef Award recipient. Nell's a core maintainer of Supermarket and Habitat. She speaks at conferences, hosts webinars, writes blog posts, and obviously you can hear her here on the Food Fight Show. So whether you're considering your first open source contribution or adopting the latest features of Habitat, Nell's always been there to help, and it certainly was a privilege to see you receive that award, Nell. Congratulations.
I was very touched, and it's funny because the way these awards work is the community puts in nominations, and anyone can put in a nomination for an awesome community chef, but then the people who decide on who those awards go to based on the nominations are people who have previously won it. And I worked very closely with 4 of them, so I was pretty shocked they were able to keep it a secret from me. So good on that. You know, I gave a talk on secrets management, so chef can keep multiple kinds of secrets. Anyway, all in all, it was a fantastic ChefConf, and we are super looking forward to next year's. So those are our announcements, and now let's move into the main discussion of this show, which is around Habitat and Inspec and how they can be used together. So Adam, do you want to give us just a quick overview of how Habitat and Inspec can work together? I know about Inspec in terms of compliance, but I personally haven't used it too much outside of the compliance world.
Sure. So I'll step back for a second and at least talk a little bit about Habitat and Inspec at a high level. So for any new listeners to the podcast, we get them a little bit up to speed if they're not familiar with these. So besides providing a really sane and beautiful, smart way to build applications, Habitat provides this thing called the Habitat Supervisor, which runs a process that's delivered via the package that you build, your Habitat artifact, your Habitat package. It keeps it running. It provides an API to interact with it. It maintains service configuration, lots of really great things. So definitely go to habitat.sh and learn more about it. Inspec, on the other side, is our compliance as code solution. So it allows you to express your compliance and security requirements using human readable language, but that language is also executable. So you can have a compliance officer who might not know how to write said awk grep scripts in order to find the status of a compliance artifact somewhere in your systems. A compliance officer like that can be working with an engineer using that same policy in codifying their expectations on what we call a profile. Inspec can take that executable profile and then scan a node for compliance status either locally or remotely. So we recently introduced a feature inside of Inspec that with a single command, you can take an Inspec profile and generate a Habitat package from that profile. So it uses Habitat's awesome dependency management stuff to bring in Inspec, set up all the run hooks and things that are necessary for a package to run under the Habitat supervisor. And then what you're left with is a self-contained compliance artifact. So just like you have artifacts for your actual applications, you can have artifacts that contain your compliance profile and your compliance requirements. When you run that Inspec created Habitat package, it'll execute that Inspec profile in a loop, sleeping between each run. And that sleep time is completely configurable just with your normal Habitat means. But then it writes its findings to JSON files that can be scooped up and reported on. And we have more stuff coming for that with our commercial products later on. But anyone can take this, this is all open source, the stuff that I'm describing right now, and you can take this and scoop up those JSON files, put them in an elk stack, or do whatever else you want to do with that information. So when you think about that, you have your application artifacts and your compliance artifacts. Given that the Habitat supervisor can now run multiple packages under a single supervisor, you can run your app and your app's compliance profile simultaneously in parallel. Those artifacts can be worked on by different teams or the same teams, meaning you can be changing and updating your compliance rules as new vulnerabilities exist, or you're iterating on them just the same way you iterate on your applications, but they're not dependent on one another. I can be releasing my compliance rules every week, but maybe releasing my application every day, or maybe once a month, it doesn't matter. Each can, because they're separate artifacts, they're separate packages and separate services, they can have their own update strategies, which is a functionality the Habitat supervisor can use to automatically update when new profile or new packages become available in the depot, the artifact repository. And those update strategies can be different. You might not want to bounce your entire application stack at the same time across the Habitat supervisor ring, but it's totally okay if you do that for a compliance profile because Inspec is only operating periodically. So it offers you a ton of customization, a ton of flexibility, but with this, you get to treat your compliance rules the same way you treat your code, the same way you treat your applications. And it gets us closer to what we like to call continuous compliance, right? It gets to the point where you're constantly scanning for your compliance status rather than the day the auditor walks in the door and says, hey, it's time for your audit. Rather than saying, okay, everyone stop work and go scan your fleets and we're going to take a week to get our paperwork ready, the auditor walks in and you can just hand the document over that says, look, this is the results of all of our Inspec runs that occurred within the last 15 minutes. We're done here. And it gives you that sense of stability and confidence that you're not going to release something without and introduce a compliance issue along the same way. So I think that's really cool, and I'm really excited to see how people are going to start using that new functionality.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that overview. And Tom, you have a great blog post on Chef and Inspec, which we'll link in the show notes. But I know you were using Habitat and Inspec together recently. Is that correct?
Yes, but not in that same way. What happened was I was looking for ways. I spent a lot of time looking for ways that I could get security and operations teams to work together more effectively. So to really just like knock down that silo between them, so we get our nice, like DevSecOps space. And I was looking for ideas. I was investigating different things, and I struck on test-driven security, which is the idea of integrating security testing into your CI/CD pipeline. And that, a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, okay, here we go. Here we can actually get security much closer, to the deployment of new services that way. And I already knew a little bit about Inspec. I had never used it before. And so I said, okay, this is an interesting topic. What would it be like, or what would a good workflow look like for a security team and an operations team to work together with this tool? So I started with Annie Hedgepat's series, trying to, learning how to use Inspec. So I went through that blog series. It is an amazing blog series, very extensive, and ended up building a small repo that is, it's a very basic Chef repo. It has Test Kitchen integrated in it, and it brings up a host. It downloads a Habitat package for a service I had built. Launches that service, and then you can use Kitchen Verify and run a set of tests against that new instance. So so I went down that path. Trying to think here. And what's if you actually and we'll have to link to this into notes, link to the actual repo. If you notice, there's actually several failed tests in there. Those were not intentional. Those were definitely things that I did not expect. So for instance, when I was developing this initial web service, I just had it binding to all addresses and listing on 8080, just so I could get up and going. I then eventually graduated to the idea, I'm going to use Habitat to package this up, and I'll probably front it with Nginx, because Nginx would take care of the SSL for me, and it would I could maybe put in some authentication authorization via Nginx. Awesome. So that was the plan I was moving down, and I have a test in there that just says, the only ports that should be open on this are 20 for SSH and 443 for this web service. And there's a test in there that does a scan, and it throws an error because 8080 is still open, and that that goes all the way back to really early in my development process, where I just didn't know where this project was fully going, and this test caught that for me. So you can think of again, a developer is starting off, they're building something, and you're getting closer and closer to to deploying this service, and you're pretty sure what it's going to look like, and then finally, boom, you find some bit of cruft from early on. You go, oh, that's not good. We have we intended for there to be some sort of authentication on this endpoint, and actually it's just hanging out here dangling with freely available to anyone that knows that it's there. So.
Awesome. Well, it's always really good to hear those real world stories from out in the field. So let's see here. How would you? I know if people want to get started with Inspec, I would suggest Annie Hedgepath's vlog series, which we will put in the show notes. Oh, and speaking of things that are going to be in the show notes, we're going to link to that repo that Tom was just talking about a few minutes ago. And sounds like if you want to get some open source contributions in there, there's some tests that need to be fixed. So it might be a good way to get your foot in the door. All right, so something I'm wondering about is, although Habitat certainly works quite well without containers, we emphasize a lot about how well it works with containers. Is Inspec able to scan containers along with physical infrastructure?
Yeah, so that's it's one of the things I kind of geek out about, is how agnostic to the platform Inspec itself is. So Inspec can scan, first of all, it'll scan the local machine it's installed in. So if I'm running it on my workstation, it can scan a workstation. We provide Inspec packages via Omnibus, just like we do with Chef. It's available via Ruby gems as a standalone gem. If you have your own Ruby runtime environment that you'd like to work in, it's available via Docker Hub as well as the Habitat Depot. But ultimately, wherever it is, it can scan the machine it's installed in. But it also can scan a machine remotely via SSH or WinRM. All it needs is login credentials to that machine. It does not install any software on the target machine in order to do its work. So unlike some other integration test frameworks that you kind of needed a busser to get some stuff on there, and then we would remotely execute that code, Inspec just needs to log in via SSH or WinRM to essentially run commands and check files. Then it brings all that data back to the machine running Inspec, and then all the assertions are performed there. So it's really lightweight, which means you can scan anything you can log into. Additionally, as Nell, you were alluding to, Inspec can scan a running Docker container as long as we can get to the Docker API on that host. So if Inspec is installed on the actual Docker host, you can pass Inspec the ID of the container, and it will attempt to get a shell on the container as long as it's one of the many, many OSs that we support. If that base layer of that container is one of those OSs, we can run the same commands we would run against a piece of bare metal or a VM, which I think is incredibly powerful when you think about the container ecosystem being a little sketchy security-wise, especially from the public repos. And that's not to say anyone is doing anything malicious with any malintent, purposeful malintent, but the fact is you can be running a container and you don't know where its source is from, and you don't necessarily know what the inventory of that container is. Well, if you're concerned about a configuration file within that container or some other files or other settings within that container, it doesn't matter where that container came from. We are able to log in via the API and inspect that container just like it were another VM that you had full control over. So I think that's really, it's a great feature and should alleviate a lot of people's concerns about containers in production. Then when you think about Habitat, using Habitat to build even a better container that has a lot more functionality than your standard Docker file does when making containers, it kind of opens up this big world of compliance not being an afterthought. You can start thinking about container security at the time you're building the containers as part of your pipeline. Where do you scan these things? Inspec and Habitat together solve a lot of those problems in some pretty neat ways. But on their own merits, Inspec scanning running containers, Habitat building better containers, still pretty awesome.
Right. One of the things I love most about Habitat Inspec is this concept of platform agnosticism, where an app should run exactly the same regardless of where you deploy it, and you should be able to scan it for compliance or scan it for security vulnerabilities of just the same no matter where it's deployed. So that's one of the places we're moving into is this idea of platform agnosticism. So Tom, how did you?
I actually just wanted to add on to that.
Yeah.
When I first started playing with Habitat, I ended up, creating Docker containers of my little service and so forth and launching that. But over time, I was very happy with, the native Habitat package, itself. I didn't find, after a while, I realized for at least my use cases, I didn't need to go that extra step of exporting a Docker container and sending that up to the hub or anything like that. That again, just exporting my Habitat artifact was enough for me. I can see if you have, like a container orchestration system, large sea of compute where you might want that, but if that's not what you're doing, I mean, again, the native Habitat format is just great. So
I remember I was at Microsoft Ignite Australia, and we had a show that we recorded there. But in the opening keynote, well, there's two questions the speaker asked. One was, who here uses or owns a BMW? And 2 hands went up. Mine was not one of them. But the second question was, who here uses containers? And 2 hands went up, this time including mine. So I feel we should emphasize more. I mean, Habitat works fantastic with containers, and if you're into the container world, great. But you can use it without containers too. You can move that legacy application onto a cloud instance if you want to, or package it in something, and then be able to scan that with Inspec. I mean, we've got a whole variety of complementary projects going on here. And the great thing about Inspec and Habitat is they are all open source. So Adam, if someone wants to get involved with Inspec, say maybe contributing or something like that, how would you suggest they start?
They just start. Oh, please contribute. First of all, our website is inspec.io. Which has more information about what Inspec is, links to Annie's tutorial, an in-browser demo. So if you're not familiar with Inspec itself, it's a great place to get started, as well as every resource where resources are the building blocks within Inspec for scanning certain things. Like we have a file resource, an SSH config resource. All those resources are documented on the Inspec.io site. So when you're ready to contribute, as Nell mentioned, it is an open source project. It's all on GitHub in the Chef org, so github.com/chef/inspec. And the code is there, and we would happily accept the PR. If you're confused on where to start, there's no better forum to chat with us than the community Slack. So if you go to the Chef community Slack, which is community-slack.chef.io, which I'm sure we'll put in the notes. And if not, I just basically forced Nell to put it in the notes by mentioning it in the recording. So it'll be in the notes. Ha! I'm the guy with the microphone now. But community-slack.chef.io, register for an account if you're not there, because everyone needs yet another Slack team to join. Come on in to the Inspec channel, and you'll find a whole bunch of people that are super, super interested in helping you make that first contribution, answering your questions, and soon you'll find that you'll be one of the ones answering questions, and it will be awesome. And hopefully Tom will back me up on this, because he chopped in and asked some questions, and now I see him answering questions, and it's a wonderful thing to see our community constantly growing.
Yep. Yeah. No. I started jumping into that Slack channel again, month or two, or probably close to 2 months ago, when I first started working this, and it's just an insanely helpful channel, just to be able to talk with people in real time and just go over, just be able to explain what what am I trying to do? So one of the things that I had to do was I approached my tests a little bit differently than you might do a compliance test. So a lot of compliance tests are written to be prescriptive. They're written to be, hey, the state of my host should be like this. And I decided to turn that on its head and say, hey, you know what? Let's just, how about a security team just write tests more in the style of, hey, you can do anything except these sort of, things. So don't, it's not that your SSL and TLS configuration needs to look like X. It just needs to not have SSL v2 and v3 enabled. So that was, I needed a bit of help writing my tests in that way and rethinking how I would do my sort of tests. And so the Slack channel was just amazingly helpful for me to do that.
One of the things I love about test-driven development in general, whether it's Inspec or other things, is I remember when I was getting started, it felt like I was constantly banging my head against it. But what it was teaching me was how to design my code in a way that was functional, that was reusable, and that was maintainable. And I cannot thank the people who helped me with that enough. I feel like the combination of learning how to write tests, learning how to code to make those tests pass, along with the mentorship I received from so many people, was just so vital in my development as a developer.
And honestly, the people like me, I'm one of the maintainers of Inspec, in addition to doing the community management stuff. And one of the things that's incredibly powerful for me is learning how people are actually using the tool. One of the things that I never had a lot of exposure to was public sector, heavily regulated environments, right? I came from WebMD, so HIPAA and SOX being a public company, those were things. But boy, like SOX has nothing on some of like the DISA requirements and the STIGs that those organizations have to hold themselves to. And honestly, if you just look at how the Inspec code base has evolved over the past 6, 7, 8 months, a bunch of features were added specifically because things like the Center for Internet Security benchmarks were so complex that additional features had to be added simply to match the types of controls those documents were enforcing in certain government agencies. So by joining the Slack and by talking to us and explaining how Inspec may or may not be working for you only helps us make Inspec better. So even if you're not comfortable submitting a PR, we'll help you submit your PR. We'll happily get on a Zoom video call and pair with you and get you across the finish line. But if you're not there yet, just submitting issues, coming into the Slack channel, helping us understand how you're using the tool or what you'd like to see the tool do, you're likely to be exposing us to use cases that we never even thought about. So don't be shy. Come on in. We're a friendly bunch, and we want you to use Inspec, and we want you to be happy using that tool, because no one, life's too short to not automate stuff. So for goodness sake, automate your compliance stuff. Get that out of your way.
Another site we have to mention is there is a GitHub org for Inspec STIGs. There's two pretty large repos for RHEL-based systems. Hi, Paul Zarkowski. He is one of the maintainers of that. He added me as a member to that org. But that is a huge collection of Inspec profiles and tests. Again, if you want to just even see, you know, what are some of the things I can be testing for, start there. That, again, that is just a huge repository and so much to learn from.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I also didn't call out the DevSec project, which the original Inspec maintainers started, which, you know, even though Inspec is stewarded by Chef and it's a Chef product, we are agnostic to what configuration management tooling you're using. So Inspec is a scanning and reporting tool. It doesn't auto remediate, and that's on purpose. Many government agencies and other regulatory agencies do not permit the same tool to audit and fix, right? That would just be all sorts of bad news. So Inspec is really focused on the scanning piece. So the DevSec project, which we'll hopefully include links to also, includes a number of profiles that you can get started with. There's a Linux baseline, an SSL baseline, a Docker baseline that you can just start using. And remind me to talk about profile inheritance now after I'm done with this spiel, because I think that'd be something important to cover too. But as you can use the offerings from DevSec, but they also include cookbooks, Ansible playbooks, Puppet manifests, a bunch of different things that you can use to remediate depending on your configuration tool of choice. So definitely check out the DevSec project. There's a lot of great stuff there and a growing community of users and contributors there as well.
Awesome. Well, here is your reminder to talk about profile inheritance.
Hey, I should talk about profile inheritance. I think if you're a longtime Chef user and you think back to the initial creation of Supermarket and the idea of sharing cookbooks, you would find that a lot of those cookbooks were not easily usable within your organization. Someone would create that cookbook, it would work really well for that person and that person's needs, but there was one or two small behaviors in that cookbook that just didn't work well for you. So many people would try and create cookbooks that were really complex with lots of attributes, lots of tunables, and that just made the cookbook even worse to use or even more difficult to maintain, honestly. So the path would be then to fork the cookbook, and then like driving a car off the lot, it's immediately lost value. Unless you're constantly pulling from that upstream, that cookbook is now yours. It's not a community cookbook anymore. I will credit the Inspec creators with thinking about this problem right out of the get-go, because if you look at the Linux baseline, the CIS Linux baseline, for example, the benchmark rather, it's ridiculous. I've said this publicly before. I don't believe there's a single host in the world that can pass the Linux benchmark, and if it does, it probably can't run your application. So if you probably want to use many of the things in that benchmark, though. So you can write what we call a profile overlay. Basically, it's a meta profile that brings in someone else's profile, like the CIS Linux benchmark from the DevSec project. But within your profile overlay, your top level profile, your wrapper profile, if you will, you can inherit that original profile and then make changes. So if a particular control doesn't apply to your environment, you can skip that control. You can skip that test. If you disagree that control 34 is a high priority and is a low priority, but you still want to report on it, you can alter the impact score of a particular control. So it provides the ability to reuse and have these profiles be composable while not requiring you to fork these profiles and then miss updates in the future. So definitely check out the ability to inherit profiles and modify them. It is a super, super useful tool to be able to make your profiles both internally and externally reusable.
Yeah, I'll say it definitely. I ended up using that. I'm looking at in my repository my site Nginx wrapper cookbook, and that was one of the things I have a dependency on the Nginx baseline. You know, again, just so I could reuse other people's tests, just to make my life so much easier.
Right. It's always nice when you have that inheritance or that extensibility where you can build on what others have built, but if you have slightly different requirements for your environment, you can then easily adapt them to be appropriate for your environment. And Inspec certainly does that well, and I think Habitat does that quite well as well, to bring the conversation back there a little bit.
Totally.
I do want to say I am on the Habitat core team, and we are always looking for information about how people are using it or people who want to contribute to it. It's written in Rust, which is has a bit of a learning cliff to it. But I know an initiative we're trying to take is to reserve some more time for the core team members to pair with a member of the community who wants to learn Rust or learn how to contribute to Habitat. So keep an eye out for more announcements on that. And you can get involved with Habitat. There is the Habitat Slack, which is, I'll put it in the chat, but if you go to habitat.sh/community, you should be able to find the link there, but the link will also be in the show notes. And it's very similar. We'd love if you jump on in, ask questions. You know, it's just like Inspec, it's a product that's early in its life. And it's an open source project, so where it goes from here is largely going to be shaped by our community of users and how they use it and what problems it solves for them, what problems it doesn't solve, what problems they need to solve. I mean, that's one of the things I like about Chef open source so much, is we put that emphasis there.
Aren't you legally obligated to refer to the Habitat Slack as Habitat?
I forgot about that. Yeah, Habitat. Yeah, we've got all sorts of whatever.
We can edit this later. I'm sure we can slide that in or re-record that section. I just don't want you to get in trouble, you know?
No, that's right. I appreciate that. You're looking out for me. Yeah, right, this is not an official Chef Twitter, but there is a Habitat Twitter feed, twitter.com/ I think it's Habitat. We'll put that in the show notes too, where there's pictures of cats doing things, and we talk about how they relate to concerns of Habitat users. So I really think cute animals make the best analogies when you're teaching or learning something on the internet.
We may as well we can mute Tom now. He's gone for this. He's going to be spending the rest of the time.
I just found the Habitat Twitter, and this is awesome. It's one of those, the cat in one of those little space pod backpacks that people like that go around with. So our cats, Pelicos, and they have a Twitter account. They're at Secure Cats.
Oh, that's awesome! Oh my God, that is fantastic. We're starting. I think it's a trend now. Technology concept cats. Yeah, that's awesome.
I was gonna say I've thought of actually starting a tech newsletter, but also including our cats in it. So it's just kind of like subscribe to my newsletter. Here's a little bit of interesting technology, and then here's some of the things my cats did, this week and stuff like that. So.
I would absolutely support that. I don't have cats. I have 2 pet bunnies, but I might think about doing something with that as well. I call them the Habibuns now.
Oh.
Yep. Good.
Do we have a dadjoke.wave file or something we're supposed to play?
If we don't, we should. Awesome. Well, it sounds like we're starting to kind of wrap up a little bit, but was there anything you two wanted to add about Habitat, Inspec, Chef, everything in between?
I'm going to even though I'm the Inspec community person, I'm making an impassioned plea to all of you listening to try Habitat. I know it might be a little hard if you're new to what Habitat is. It may look a little daunting. I assure you it will change the way you think about building your applications and deploying them. You do not have to use all the features of Habitat to improve the way you build your applications. If the connected supervisors thing isn't your cup of tea, don't worry about it. Just using the build process alone as a way of solving dependencies, building artifacts that are dependable, and having an API. Imagine systemd having a really great REST API that you could hit and find out stuff about your services. That's what the Habitat Supervisor provides. It'll keep your services running and give you insight into them. So just trying little bits of it, you will find that it makes your life so much better. So try it out, and then when you want to talk compliance with it, we have something to talk about, and I would absolutely encourage you to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about ways these open source tools can make your lives better.
Right.
I'd like to add 2 things. First off, I came to the Chef ecosystem just only maybe several months back. It's been a great community. I joined the Habitat Slack first. I wanted to figure out how to get a Python Flask app running, under Habitat. So I spent a lot of time in Slack there going over that. Had a ton of great help. My second, major interaction with the chef community is now Inspec. Again, great community and tons of help. And the second thing is, going back to, I was talking with ops and security. Again, just, like anything you can find to, that, these, your two teams can use together, just to kind of, break down that sort of silo, like try it out. I've spent a little bit of time, talking to members of the InfoSec community, and this isn't their this isn't necessarily one of their normal tools they might be using, but I found a lot of interest from members of the security community wanting to know, okay, how do we get closer to the deploys? How do we not be like stuck over in a corner or anything like that? So again, excellent tool just to kind of bridge that gap within your organization.
Right. The more I found we create together, I think the more collaboration happens, to get kind of wordy with you there. All right. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. And why don't we move on to picks, which we do at the end of each Food Fight show. So I have two. So one of the prizes for being an awesome community chef was the Oculus Rift, which I tried, and I like it, though I've read you need to build a tolerance, which I think is correct. I can go about 15 minutes, but then I start to get really dizzy and disoriented. So I'm mostly just doing the interactive movies things, which are very cool, but hoping to build that tolerance up and move into games. And the second pick I have is RX bars. These are protein bars, and something I found out recently is my fasting glucose is lower than most people's. It's lower than it should be. So I don't just get hangry. It gets a lot worse than that. So I've been looking for sources of protein that don't come with, that I can carry with me on flights and stuff, but that don't come with a ton of added sugar. And RX bars have definitely fit that for me. I really like the chocolate and sea salt ones, but there's a variety of them available as well. So over to you, Adam. What are your picks for today?
I've got one. So I will self-proclaim to be an Apple fan person. I'm definitely in the Apple ecosystem, and I'm not ashamed. So I've been trying to go all in on HomeKit related stuff. So I have a bunch of Lutron Caseta switches that are super responsive and great to use with HomeKit. I just installed some Schlage Sense locks for my doors, so I can remotely throw the deadbolt. And when I'm pulling out of the driveway heading to a vacation spot or to my wife's family's house in Pennsylvania, I don't have to stop a mile down the road when someone says, "Hey, did I lock the front door?" I can just look at my phone and say yes or no, and now it's locked. So I'm totally into HomeKit. It's wonderful. But I do have a bunch of devices that aren't HomeKit compatible directly. So Homebridge is a open source Node.js server. It's very lightweight, but it provides plugins to things that aren't HomeKit compatible and acts as a bridge to HomeKit. So my garage door opener, for example, I have an app for that, but it's not HomeKit compatible. I can point Homebridge at it, and now it shows up in HomeKit. My alarm system is another one where I can say, "Hey Siri, good night," and it locks the doors, turns off the lights, arms the home security system, make sure the garage door is closed. So yeah, I'm totally geeking out about home automation stuff lately, and Homebridge has solved a whole bunch of integration problems that I had for devices that aren't yet HomeKit compatible. So check it out. It's open source, Node.js. You can find it on GitHub.
Awesome. That sounds quite fantastic. Tom, what are your picks for today?
I was not prepared for this. What should I be picking? What is?
What's something non-techie that you've enjoyed lately?
Well, I mean, I have several weeks off in between jobs, so I'm really enjoying vacation. So vacation might be one of my picks. I'm waking up the alarm still goes off at 6 a.m. The aim is to still be in bed at like 9 a.m. and just, a lot of us tend to have very stressful jobs. And so if you're gonna change jobs, and you can, again, you're able to do this, take some time off and just like enjoy yourself. That's something I think we don't always take a lot of time to do. I wake up, I go to the gym, I work on a passion project. The afternoons are split between, I can go sailing, I can go drag racing, or there's a volunteer organization for underrepresented groups in tech in Boston called Resilient Coders. So I'm going over there, just to mentor students. Just started doing that, but I guess really, if you ever have the chance in life, just take a little bit of time for yourself and just, casually go out, go through your days for a little bit stress-free and just enjoy yourself.
I love that his pick is don't work. Like, that is just awesome.
I think that's fantastic.
That is one of the best picks I've ever heard on the show. Just don't work.
I love it. Cool. And I think all three of us will add the Habitat Twitter feed. I'm hoping I'm not going to get in trouble for promoting that, but to our picks. Enjoy Kat's talking about habitat related concepts. Well, I think that about closes out our show today, but I want to remind everyone you can follow the @FoodFightShow on Twitter. Feel free to tweet us about topics you'd like to see covered, questions, comments, whatever you like. And with that, thank you so much for listening today, and we will talk to you all soon. Thanks again, Adam and Tom, for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
All right.